But, the smarter thing is to let some of it happen for you, letting part of the universe doing that. And I think with your Zen philosophy, you realize that. And if you do the right things, the world does a lot of things for you.
Yeah, and to your point of listening, and my point earlier when I was saying that when I was younger, there's a whole bunch of drama, and it came from, just like you were said, trying to stick a round peg in a square hole. I'm like, this is gonna go, it's gotta go this way only. So young.
And I think, we all have to learn, and we learn a lot from our mistakes,
Oh, absolutely.
And I think there's a lot of fear right now going on, that people are afraid and they
Oh,
don't
yeah.
want to do things because they're afraid. And, you've got to know enough to do something. And
Right.
yes, you may when you do something, you're going to either have success or failure. Okay. So let's suppose you fail, but is that terrible? That's a lesson that not to do that again. You've learned something. So you've now been better off because you tried it. And
Exactly.
all life should be like that. And I think what you always should look at is a bit with things with a goal in mind. At the end of the day, what would you like to see accomplished?
Right.
And if you have a general design on things, you tend to get it done. Like if you're running a race, if you're jogging 20 kilometers, if you don't know where you're going, you could end up in a mess. Okay. So you really should do it in such a way that it should work out pretty well.
And to your point, you may run 26 kilometers, but if you don't have a map, you might not end up at the same finish line as everybody else.
Yeah, my co-author Harriet Tinka talks about the time she ran an ultra marathon. You know what an ultra marathon is? It's
Thankfully,
literally a
no.
death race that you run over 5 days. And she ended up at one point running down the wrong hill, the wrong way. She still eventually ran to the finish line.
Oh, no way. Good
but
for
it
her.
was all the wrong things happening. And I tell you, if you have a roadmap, it's much easier that way.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I attribute my later years success to, is my meditation, because my meditation is definitely my roadmap. So whenever anything gets, when I need to come to a turn or there's a fork in the road, I just sit down, meditate, and like, hey, universe, what's going on? Which way? Like they never send me down the wrong path.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. And I think many people like yourself are well grounded because of the fact you've had a lot of experience in your life. You've had a lot of things that have gone on in your life. And my turning point came in 2003 when I went through a very horrendous time. I
Yeah,
was
talk about that a
walking,
little bit.
yeah, I was walking with my wife in Disneyland, the happiest place on earth, in fact. And she turned to me and she said, "What's wrong with you, hon?" For once in my life, I hadn't said anything wrong. I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't even thunk anything wrong. So I was taken a little bit. So what do you mean? She said, "Listen to your foot." Now, that's a funny statement. Listen to your foot. So I asked her, "What do you mean, listen to your foot?" She said, "Well, listen to it." And my foot had suddenly developed a foot drop. It wasn't lifting up with each step. Now, your brain is programmed for your foot to walk normally. Every step you take, your foot goes. And mine wasn't doing that. It was slapping on the pavement. So she looked at me and she said, "When we get back, you better get this checked out." Well, when your wife tells you, you better get it checked out, you better listen. So I got back and I have every test known. I had brain scans, I had CAT scans, I had scans. And you know what they showed at the end of the day?
What's that?
Absolutely nothing. There was nothing wrong. The doctors were perplexed. They thought I had a brain tumor or maybe a slipped disc or something, but they couldn't find anything.
Wow.
So then I went on more tests and more tests and more tests. I had the $1 billion workup. I had tests that don't even exist done. And finally, I went to a neurologist, a leading neurologist. And a neurologist is a specialist in the nerves. And he looked at me and he said, "You better be sitting down when I tell you this." I said, "Why? I have a dropped right foot." He said, "No, you don't. You have ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and you're going to be dead in 6 months. Get your affairs in order."
Yikes.
So, what do you do? I said, "Well, is there a way to prove this?" He said, "Of course, an autopsy."
Wow, that's kind of a D thing to say.
And I said, okay, I'm not going to die to prove you wrong, I said. So I went through phases then. I went through anger. I went through bargaining. I went through depression. I went through all these phases that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote in her book on death and dying. When you go through this, you go through a lot of emotional hardship. Finally, I sat down with my wife and said, what do you think I have? She said, I have no idea, but you're smart enough to figure it out. Okay. So I knew I was on my own then. And, 2003 it was. And
Wow.
there was just this new thing invented. You might have heard of it. It's called the internet. Okay.
Oh, that's right. We're peers. I forgot.
Yes, it was very, very primitive back then, though. You had to use dial-on connections. Computers had very little memory. So to communicate them, you had to use commands. You used to have to use a language called DOS. Things that we think very primitive now, but that's how we did. So I had friends that were experts in this, and they were really computer nerds back then. They figured, I said, well, let's look up everything that may be ALS, but isn't ALS. And, I found a doctor in Colorado Springs, Colorado, by the name of David Martz, who had the same story as I did, but he got worse much more rapidly. He was on his deathbed after 2 months.
Ooh,
He could
yikes.
barely lift his head from the pillow. And doctors were coming from around the world to say goodbye to him because he was so well known. And a doctor came up from Texas and looked at David and said, David, there's something wrong with this picture. I don't think you have ALS. I don't think you have Lou Gehrig disease. What do I have? He whispered. He was so weak he could only whisper. The doctor said, I think you have something called chronic Lyme's disease. Lyme's disease is the bite of a tick.
Right.
But in some people, it causes a chronic neurological illness, and it mimics everything. And so David whispered back, well, what do I do? He said, I'm going to start you on treatment, said the doctor from Texas. And he started him on treatment, and David was like Lazarus arriving from the dead. He just got up and started dancing and talking and everything else.
Yeah, that's wild. So when was Lyme's disease? So obviously it must have been diagnosed back then.
Lyme's disease was called Lyme's disease because there were outbreaks in New England. In one of the towns was called Lymes. Lymes,
yeah.
Connecticut it was.
Yeah, I actually know it, of course. I lived in Connecticut.
Well, there you go. And there were a couple of other towns. One was called Old Lymes, and there was another town nearby. And there were a bunch of children getting sick. And their parents would take them to their doctors, and the doctors would, oh, there's nothing wrong with them. They're just, and finally, the parents forced the issue, and they figured out there was this tick that left a bacteria inside the body, and that bacteria caused all sorts of problems. Now, there's many doctors that don't think chronic Lyme's disease still exists. I know it exists because I have it, but
Right.
It's a very serious disease. But I want to emphasize this, is that, when you're given lemons, you can make lemonade. It's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens.
Right.
So I found my journey, I found my destination. And, at the end of that, you either go two ways. One is you get cruel, you get mean, you take that path, or at the other path, you try to give back. You realize you've been given a second chance. You realize that there's an opportunity here to make it better for things. And I did a lot. One of the things I did was I started sponsoring some charities. And one of the charities I sponsored was a Woman of Distinction Award for the YWCA. And when I did that, I met a young lady by the name of Harriet Tinka. Harriet Tinka was for a Turning Points competition, and her life turned around. And her story was that she was stabbed and left for dead after she was kidnapped by one of her classmates while at university.
Ooh.
And so Harriet was a fascinating person. She bought me lunch, and we started talking. And we found that we had a very much of a commonality. And we found all these wonderful things that we call golden pearls of wisdom that can make everybody better and make their lives better. And so we put them together in a book called The Secrets of Living a Fantastic Life. It took 4 to 5 years to write. It's just coming out now.
Wow.
But the important thing about it is it can help other people without going through the hardships we've done. It can help other people in this time of COVID right now, where what was it I read yesterday? 33 million Americans unemployed.
Wow.
You know, how many people are going through hardship and devastation? There's been over 100,000 deaths in the United States. Oh my goodness.
Right.
It's a terribly traumatic thing. But you know, in a time of great problems like this, there's a time of great healing. There's a time to go to another level. There's a time to really make your life better. And I think this is what people have to look at. That
Right.
this is an opportunity, not a catastrophe. This is
Right.
an opportunity to go down a different path, just like a path I had taken.
Right. And I don't think, I don't want to diminish anybody who's suffering or ill right now, but I totally believe exactly what you're saying, that, you know, when we think about listening to the universe and hearing what the universe has to say, I think sometimes lessons come to us individually, personally, and sometimes a whole bunch of people have to learn a lesson. Like sometimes an entire planet has to learn a lesson, but the universe says, hey, you know what? I got a great teacher for you. And it, I think right now, like I said, and not to diminish anybody who's suffering, but that there's a lot to be learned from what we're going through right now. And like you said,
I
you can
think
either,
so, and I would like to have everybody have that opportunity to learn to grow. Take this time for a time for themselves to
right,
do it. You know, as we're social isolating, so to speak, as
right,
we're, you know, there's more time to read. There's more time to communicate in these internet presences. We have more time to do things for ourselves. So there is a silver lining in that cloud. There's a benefit here that if people want to reach out and take it, they can take it.
right,
And that's why I make myself available for these podcasts. I make myself available for this so I can help people, so I can reach out and really help people along. You know, I in this life, I'm serving people rather than the other way around. When
right,
I was a cosmetic doctor, for the top 30 years, I did a lot of great work, but it wasn't all that I wanted to do. So last year I moved away from that. Last year I decided it's time to take this journey even further. And then COVID hit. And so it was a very interesting time for it all to come together.
Well, my listeners know this story too, and it sounds like, talking about us being kindred spirits, I was working for Fidelity Investments for about 11 years, and they're a good company. They paid well, but they worked you like a dog. And there was just one point. My listeners obviously know this. I went in on a Sunday just to get some work done. And it was a beautiful day, pretty much like it was today. And I got my work done, and I was typing away, and I'm asking myself just in my head, I'm like, am I done? And then I hear this voice in my head saying, you're done. And not meaning you're done for the day, you're done here for good. It's time to move on to something else. And with that, I kind of typed up a letter of resignation, thanking my employers for the time, and just slid it under the door and said, I think it's time for a new chapter. I think there's something bigger that I need to be doing out in the world than processing payrolls.
Yeah, you know, I'll tell you, the vast majority of mankind probably has lives of what is called quiet desperation, that they go to work every day, they do their job, then they go home. And that goes over and over and over again. There's so many jobs out there that have to be done. Thank God people do them. But
Absolutely.
at the same time, they really are not what people want to do. They're not really about what they want to be. They're not really about who they are. And I think you found early that was the case. And you
Early-ish.
decided very smartly that you wanted to do other things, and that life was not just your life was not defined by your job.
No. I had a guest on the show a long time ago when Zen Commuter was just starting out, and she was talking about how many times when we meet new people, we never ask who they are. We ask what they do. You know what I mean? It's like we don't get to know who they are. It's like, so what do you do? As you know, it's just kind of rolls off the tongue. So and so, the so and so. So, oh, hey, nice to meet you. What do you do? And it's like, we can't be defined. And to her point, we need to be stretching our limits and stretching our boundaries of what defines us, and work being not even a portion of that.
Absolutely. I think really it's much nicer to when you meet somebody to talk to them for a bit. Say, you know, you've got an interesting smile. Tell me
Right.
about what's behind it. You know, you've got, your eyes, there's something unique about them. talking in a different way really helps us to frame this discussion we're going to have. When you enter into a conversation, you go down a very narrow path if you bring it by that what do you do sort of thing.
Right.
Now, if somebody asked me that, I think I'd probably have such a long checklist of things that I've done. It would probably take forever to go through it.
Yeah, they'd probably be like, just saying with me, they're like, oh boy, did I ask the wrong question.
Yeah, that's not a good question. I said, let's try another. Let's start this conversation again.
Yeah, take two.
And how many times we have to do that, because really the conversation is not the best.
Oh yeah. I mean, I tell listeners that I usually get a good feel. The good news is that as I meditate more, as I become more aware of lessons and the universe and energies, the people I meet, like when I was younger, my goal was have friends, have as many friends as you want. If somebody wants to be your friend, then you befriend them, whether they are the worst possible human being in the world. You're like, oh, they want to be my friend? Cool. And accordingly, just like I said, that brought a ton of drama. But now I'm like, because I'm older, wiser, I'm like, the people that come to me are just light and kind and loving and just
but
add to my life.
you attract what you give out. And
Right.
I think if you're putting out a vibration where you're in a certain state, in a certain mindset, you attract more people into that mindset.
Right.
And I think that's always the way it was and always the way it's going to be. So I think the universe, and it functions in a fairly similar way, that when you're in a certain state, you attract what you give out.
Right. And to your point earlier, being aware of those things. So many times that one of the reasons I love talking about meditation and have a meditation podcast is that all these lessons are coming to us, but we're hearing the news blaring. We're hearing like our significant other talking about something that, not that's, yelling at us, or we just got a lot of different noise coming at us. So the universe saying, hey, hey, and you're like, what is that? Is that a gnat? I got a whole bunch of noise coming around me. But when we quiet ourselves, when we meditate, turn all that out, you're like, oh, okay, cool. Oh no, I hear what you're saying. I get you. Cool. And that's how we go on. So
you're absolutely right. I think that's what we always have to realize, is that we give what we get back. And the golden rule is always to treat others as you like to be treated. But I think it's more than that.
Right.
I think really the way things happen is the way you make them happen. If you're out there vibrating with a certain frequency and doing things in a certain way and putting things out the way you want, podcasts, for example, like you do, just think how many more people come to you as a result of that.
Right, right. And I am absolutely transparent to say that, Zen Commuter and Commuter 5 are for my listeners, but not solely. I mean, I have met so many people, and now you, that are just kind and loving and just interesting. I'm like, wow, look at this life that I made for myself. Look at this. I'm like, I get to meet some of the coolest people and talk about life in a positive way. I'm like, universe, you hooked up your boy. I'm thankful.
Look how different that was from your life and as a infidelity there and doing the things you did every day. Look how different it has become. Now,
Yeah.
but the one couple of things, first of all, it took courage to make that step. You really had to be a very courageous person, and people are locked in fear right now. It's very
Right.
hard to make that courageous step and do things. But the second thing is you also had to become vulnerable.
Right.
And we're guys. We don't become
We don't do
always
vulnerable.
doing stuff. We're supposed to be on our high horse. And if we fall off that high horse, there's a very big price to pay for it. Guys don't talk about vulnerability because it's not in their vocabulary.
Right.
When I used to play high school football, we used to have what were called the pits, where you used to be the running back and there'd be two guys blocking for you, and you had to get through two guys on the other side and the middle linebacker on this other side. Now, I'll tell you, 9 times out of 10, you got your bell rung.
That's why I played violin.
10, you got through. But when you got your bell rung, do you think you said anything? Do you think you cried? Do you think you said that hurt? No, you sucked it up, got up again, and did it exactly again. I'll guarantee in my day there was something called the concussion, and I probably had a couple. But do you think I ever recognized it as such? No, you got up and do it again.
Right.
When I was teenager, I used to ride motorcycles. Well, craziest thing in the world to do, most dangerous thing in the world. But, you just do it. You
Right.
fall on the pavement, you get up again, and you keep doing it. And, life teaches us some lessons. But one of the lessons I think men have to learn too is being vulnerable is okay.
Right.
Being in a situation where you're emotional is okay. Being in a situation where you discuss emotions are okay.
Right.
It's not the He-Man all the time. It's not your Tarzan and that sort of thing. You don't always have to be G.I. Joe. You should be a person that's much more dimensional for that in the 21st century.
Well, I think because we're peers, we can both recognize that it is changing. That, like you said, when we were both in high school or back in the day, so to speak, that's exactly what it was. That, it's like, suck it up. You don't cry. Just brush yourself off, get up, go again. And now, obviously, masculinity is taking a much more broadened approach that, incorporating all the things you talk about, vulnerability, being more emotional, talking about things that are highs, lows. So it's good to see. That is another benefit of being in my 50s. I'm like, wow, I'm seeing the world change. I like that.
Well, I think also the benefit is you get to meet so many interesting people. You get to learn from them, and you also get to teach them.
Right.
You also get a chance to share with them. And I think that's the world of the 21st century that I really like.
Right.
The part we're able to interact over the miles, over the distances, without any big problem. When COVID was going big in Italy, I have a good friend that's a plastic surgeon there. And so I was able to communicate with him every day in Milan, Italy.
Wow.
I have another good friend in Egypt. So again, this world has shrunk because of the boundaries are smaller now. We have means of mass communication that makes those distances gone.
Oh yeah, and I say this with 100% humility that if when I was in high school, if anybody had said, you know what, when you're going to be older, you're going to talk to people and from all over the world. You're going to be listening and talking to people from every corner of the globe. Be like, what? And to your point, to think about the fact that you and I are talking, and where are you right now?
I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Do you know where that is?
No.
No, it's straight north of Montana, about 5 miles, 5 hours due north by the drive.
Oh, okay. Well, now I do.
We're in the Great Plains. We're in the great part there. Edmonton's a city of over 1 million. We have a hockey team that you might have heard about called the Edmonton Oilers because Wayne Gretzky, one of the greatest hockey players on the earth, made all his records when he was in Edmonton. He
nice.
Was one of our greatest hockey players. So we got on the map simply because we've had some real good things happen to us.
So I'm a total tree hugger. So what's nature like out there? Is it just beautiful?
Today is a bit of a challenging day. I woke up, drove to the hospital for some meetings, and it was snowing and raining today. Okay, so a bit of a challenge. But Saturday and Sunday, it's going to be 70, 80 degrees. So this is what I call the changing season. We were very dry until about 3 weeks ago. So any precipitation of any form is really good because at this time of year, if you don't get the precipitation, things don't grow. So like everything went from brown 10 days ago to brilliant green right now.
Oh, sweet.
And it's just beautiful at this time. Edmonton has the great forest. We also have the Rocky Mountains. We have Banff and Jasper. We have the Great Plains. We have forests like you would never believe. We're part of the northern rainforest. So we have trees all throughout the north. And so, at times of the year, we can get a lot of forest fires as well. But, this time of year, it's beautiful. We were turning from our winter to our spring and summer, which is the best time of the year up here. And we have very little humidity, so it's dry most of the time. So we're very, very lucky.
That's like music to my ears. That's awesome. So when you had your original diagnosis with ALS, what gave you the ability to question that? I mean, I think we both know that many people are like, a doctor is like God. So, if he says this, then I just got to suck it up. I guess I'm going to die in 6 months.
I'm a doctor as well, and I do know that doctors do make mistakes.
Right.
I also know that doctors like to pigeonhole things. They like to oversimplify things. So if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck, right?
Right.
Unfortunately, not everything that quacks is a duck. You know, there's many other things that quack too. And being a doctor, as I am, I've always learned that there are other paths, other diagnoses, other things that fit that picture. And the key is to find that diagnosis, trying to do it. So I guess it's been inbred in me. I've always been a person that, you know, yes, okay, let's suppose I have ALS and I'm going to be dead in 6 months, okay? But guess what? What if they're wrong? What if they're wrong?
Right.
Okay? There's a lot of other answers, right?
And
So,
you had said too that you went through all those stages that Kubler-Ross talks about. So, and I think that and being a doctor, it was destined that you were going to come out on the other side.
well, the only part
Like
of
Rose.
Kubler-Ross thing I didn't accept was acceptance.
Right.
I didn't want acceptance. It was
Right.
not the thing I wanted.
Right. Now, here's the thing too. Who's to say that acceptance, for her definition, is accepting that you had that illness, or
Yeah.
not, or more? It's just like acceptance of whatever will be, will be.
And I think that's where people have to get to, that but remember, you're in charge of your destiny. You're not going to be the person that's going to, if you just accept everything point blank without doing so, well, you are in charge of your destiny that way too.
Right.
But I think at the same time, it's much healthier not to be in charge of your destiny like that. I think it's much healthier to have a dialogue and an exchange. And you know, that neurologist that I had wasn't going to talk about anything else.
Right.
He wasn't ready to talk about anything else. He had made up his mind. That's all it was. Sorry,
Right.
this is the peg that fits the hole, and that's where you're going.
Exactly.
You know.
Now, did you grow up with what were your caregivers like growing up? Were they
My
strong
mom
role
and dad
models?
were just middle class person. My father was a gardener. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. I had a good childhood. I had a
Right.
childhood where we'd play outdoors every day. We'd work every day. Every winter, my father would make a backyard skating rink. Now, that's a hard thing to do back then. We didn't have
Seriously.
bags that you could do and just fill up. You had to really work at it. So my dad would put up boards and really make, so every day we'd be out there skating, having fun, playing, and it was a good childhood. I really enjoyed my childhood. It was a good time. I really did that. I went to school, went through school, did okay, barely got through grade 12, played a lot in high school, did not do very good, decided to go to university, and then I decided that I wanted to be a doctor. And, you know, being a doctor was hard work. It
Oh,
was
hell yeah.
back-breaking work. So I wasn't the best student, but when I went through high school, I went through something called a free school where you didn't have to show up. You didn't have classrooms. What they had invented was a class where you did everything by unit packs. So in social studies, for example, they'd have 30 unit packs that you would have to go through. And each unit pack would say, at the end of this unit pack, you'd be able to do A, B, C. Well, I was a smart kid, so as soon as they told me what I needed to learn, I learned it right away. I didn't learn anything else. So I finished Social 30 like in 2 weeks, and I finished all the things in no time. So it was okay because then I could play a lot, and I did a lot. I learned how to golf. I learned how to do other things. So it was a good high school, but it really cost me because when I went to university, I really had to buckle down. I really had to learn how
No
to
golf.
do things. So I learned really hard to do that. My first degree was a BSc honors in psychology, and
Nice.
I kept on going for med school. I kept on applying. I got into med school. And then after I got to med school, I wanted to become a skin doctor, a dermatologist. Now that's a hard thing to do because there's very few schools for them. So again, I applied and applied and applied, and I got accepted at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. So I became a skin doctor. And then when I graduated, there was just the start of something called cosmetic surgery. We had just invented some lasers. We had just invented Botox. We had just invented some of the things. So some new things, some new toys. I'm going to get the best at this. So,
Right.
I've been driven most of my life that I wanted to do the best at everything I can do. And that's where I think it's a good thing I had that drive. I've always been driven. Now, where does drive come from? I think part of it is inside yourself. I think part of it is the way you're brought up. I think it's part of the things that happen to you as a child because you realize the things you do really matter. I think it's part of it having a loving mother and a loving father.
Right.
I think it's because they allow you to develop as a person.
And that was actually my point for talking about your upbringing and your parents, because that was going to be my thought, and you kind of answered my question. That is, where do you think you get a mindset? And in regards to your diagnosis or rejecting the diagnosis, what do you think it is that makes somebody become a victim and somebody to say, yeah, no, not me?
And that's a difficult thing because, I've worked a lot with victims because when I was a cosmetic doctor, I learned how to correct scars. I was one of the best laser surgeons. They invented some tools that allowed us to do that. And so I would go to people and ask them, people that were badly burned, and told them we can really help you with this. And many of them said, thank you, no, I don't want the help, and
Wow.
One was a young lady that I persisted at. Her name is Kelly Farlado, and she knows this well because I called her when I got my new laser because I heard her story. She was a professional speaker, and she was speaking, and I asked her, can I help you? And she said, no. I persisted, and 6 months later, she came in for an appointment. I said, well, you've got some scars. And the problem with scars from a bad fire, from a bad burn, is they keep on growing. They keep on acting like a prison, and they get worse as a person gets older. So eventually a person can't breathe properly.
Wow.
Eventually a person can't do anything properly. So with this, we started a little test area, and she noticed it got better. And we started another little test area. Finally, we were able, after 4.5 years, to relieve her of 90% of her scars.
Wow. Was she concerned about the financial aspect of it, or what do you think?
I think some
reticence
people
was?
at the same time, they use their story as a method to generate, but I think other people use it to generate pity. And I think that's part of the thing of being a victim, is you learn things about how to generate people's action because that's what you want. Right. So you're happy being the victim because you're getting the rewards from that.
Exactly. And I used to counsel emotionally disturbed teenagers when I lived in Boston, was on a locked inpatient psych unit. And the questions I'm asking now has been a question that I've thought about for many times, because the people the kids that came into the hospital were either suicidal or homicidal. It was a locked unit. And some of them were bounced from hospital to hospital to hospital. They just totally were like, this is who I am. This is who I'm going to be for the rest of my life. And then there were people that came in that had the same thing, either were physically, sexually, or emotionally abused by their parents, and were in the hospital, and they just basically said, F this. This is not going to define me. I had a shitty upbringing, but it's not going to define who I am. So when I see stories like that, and when I hear stories, it always kind of triggers that thought. I'm like, so what is it that makes some people say, no, that's not going to be me, and other people say, you know what? Yeah, that's my lot. And I think
there are a lot of people that are in that mindset, that mentality, and then they change. There's a author by the name of Groggins who wrote a book, Can't Hurt Me. And he went through all these awful, awful experiences. And yet he learned through those experiences that he could rise above it. So now he has an auditory book, he has books, and he has a whole thing of, Can't Hurt Me. He became a Navy SEAL at one time and went through all that. But he's risen above that. And he's risen to the point that victim mentality wasn't there. And I think it's people have to make a decision, like you did when you left Fidelity Investments. You had to make one little step. Now, that wasn't your final journey, but you had to make that one little step.
Right.
And you
Right.
had to try that. Otherwise, you would not be where you're at now.
Right.
And I think people have to let those things happen. You have to try some different things to get into that situation. You
And
know, if you're in a job you don't like, you have to try and change it. There are a lot of other jobs out there that you could just salivate over. There, if you don't like your relationship with somebody, well, you either change the relationship or you change your way of being in that relationship.
right. Exactly.
And, you know, a lot of things can happen. You know, if you're in a marriage that's not working, well, it's probably not working for the other person either.
Right.
So maybe both can change. Maybe both can change.
Right.
Or how many marriages break up in this day and age?
50?
50%, 60%, 70%. I don't know. It's a lot. Okay.
Right.
But the point is that there's life after that as well. And there really are a lot of things that you can do. If you have a bad disease, you know, you learn to live with it. You learn to get above it. If you have other things going on in your life, you can change that. You literally can be a better person. And I think at the end of the day, you should be the best version of you that you can be.
Right. Absolutely. And I think a lot of it comes from the teachers in our lives, whether it be parents, caregivers, but it's also for me just having an awareness of the lessons that are coming, that are presenting themselves from the universe, and just having that meditation practice to put everything in kind of a cohesive format so I can understand what's going on. But I think we all have the life that we want to have and the life that we do have, and knowing that one can become the other with just a thought, as my mom would say.
Yes, for sure. And you know, my mother's still alive at 95, and she's still
Nice.
doing pretty well for her age. I mean, and that's amazing. My wife's father is now 90 and still doing fairly well. So
Dang.
I think, you know, choosing your parents wisely helps a lot. And I think
Yep.
that certainly is, we're blessed if we've been in that situation. But, you know, if you're not in that situation, I think you can grow from it. You can
Yep.
use those as turning points. You can learn as those to get to another level. You can
Yep.
learn how to get to other things.
Getting back to the book, how did you come up with the format of the book? How did that come to be? Because it's a
You
unique
know, the
format, and I
book
really liked it.
was an act in progress, and I had an editor in one time, and he said, you know, I like your book, but you have to make this into a journey. You have to make this into something more, because it's too preachy. It's too everything else. So what I wanted people to do was discover the parts of it. So each book starts with a quote from a very famous person, and it starts with a story. It starts with a story that's almost a parable that leads you into it.
Right.
And then the next part is about my dialogue with my co-author.
Right.
We wrote this book because we'd had meetings and meetings and meetings. And we did it over lunches. We did it over coffee. We did it in such a way. And we put the dialogue that we were having in there. And it's the way we are in life, Harriet and I. We always kid each other. We're always joking.
Right.
She's very competitive. She's an ultra marathon runner.
Yeah, she
So
seems she seems hardcore.
she's hardcore, but she's a dear. She's a sweetie. And
I
so
sense that.
we really hit it off on that book because it was just the right tone. It was the right thing to do.
And it is. It's a great. The thing I like about the book is that format, because, like you said, that parable or that story gets you thinking, and then the banter and the dialogue that you two have brings it home, because you both have something to add. It's not like one is teaching the other. You're both teachers and you're both students, and you're both coming together in a way that's engaging and very enjoyable.
You know, and that's what life is all about. You have to discover life. You can't be told life. If I tell you you have to go do something today, Tom, I bet you the chances are that you would say, well, he told me to do it. You know, but if you discover it yourself, how much more of a chance have you to really act on it?
Right.
So I really like the fact that our book is a voyage of discovery. And it
Exactly.
actually started off as 20 golden pearls, but there was just too much there. It was like eating a meal that was too big. So
Oh,
we're
really?
actually going to have a sequel to it with
Oh,
10 more
nice.
golden pearls.
Oh,
And there
nice.
will
Nice.
be 10 more voyages of discovery in it. And
Well, I
so
will.
it's going to be, that one will be up in about 6 months. We're still launching this one. We're getting there. And we're also, Harriet decided because of this COVID, that there's so many businesses in trouble right now that our pearls can help people in business too. So we're
Right.
going to write a book called The Secrets of the Fantastic Business Life as well. So
Ah,
the process of putting that together to help people in their state of despair right now. Do you know that over half the businesses in Canada and the United States are projected not to make it through
oh,
this time?
that's
That is pretty hard. It is really
that's heartbreaking.
threatening. That is scary.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But to our point, and I agree that that's could be challenging. But who's to say that something better doesn't come from those from that?
Well, and I think we are either part of the problem or part of the solution. And I would much sooner be part of the solution at any given time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because as I was looking at all the different pearls, I'm like which ones? Because obviously we can't talk about all of them, and our time is running short too. But I picked out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the 5 that spoke to me were love, vulnerability, forgiveness, gratitude, and laughter.
Okay, well, let's talk about love first.
That
Did you
story
know,
started off really
did,
dark, by the way.
yeah, did you know that love is one of the few things in life that you get more just by giving it?
I like that.
Now, unfortunately, hate is also something you get more by giving it.
Yeah,
But
it's that
I
energy.
firmly believe that love is stronger than hate, that love will conquer hate at any given time. And I really believe we're in a better state when we concentrate it. And did you know that love isn't one word? It's actually 7 different types. And the ancient Greeks found that like 2,000 years ago. You know, there's love and there's self-love and there's all sorts of love. So I
Right.
think at the same time that when we talk about love, we have to talk in the same terms. And you know, in English, we tend to lump things together. We talk about love. And did you know I could tell if a person's mother really loved them just by talking to them?
Really?
Yeah. And you know, that comes about because of the fact that uh, love is something that starts right when you're a child, right when you're a baby. And if a mother really loves their baby, that's passed on to the child and they become a different human being.
Mhm.
If that person really isn't loved at birth, they really become different. They become deranged. They become sad. They become hard. And that's where I could say it's easy to tell if their mother really loved them is because you just start talking to them. You just start talking to them very much. And you can tell if there was a love relationship there because it keeps on going. It really keeps on going forever.
Right. And it's such a good point to make because if we think about love, I mean, I don't even, it's kind of like, for me, it's like, hey, what's the secret of the universe? What's it all mean? I'm like, I don't know. Same thing. It's like, what is love? I'm like, oh man, it's just like the very nature of everything. So, and to your point, it's like different. You love your dog, you love your best friend, you love your mother, you love your significant other. It's so many different aspects of love. And hopefully, to your point, they all start with you being able to love who you are, because that's what fosters that growth going forward.
Absolutely, and I think everybody has to realize that that you know, love is something that's very fundamental. But I'm going to challenge everybody in our audience today to do something that they wouldn't regularly do, and it's I want them to do something else for somebody else that they wouldn't regularly do today. I want them to pay it forward. You know, in this COVID time, I would like to see somebody reach out to their next door neighbor and see if they can help them. You know, I would like, you know, if you have a car, maybe you can get some groceries for an elderly person in your area. Maybe you can bake some cookies and take some cookies over. Maybe you could help in such a way that, you know, I saw some terrible things of how the lineups were for food banks and how long they were. Do you realize that there are people starving in the United States and Canada because they don't have anything to help them right now? Isn't that terrible?
It's unconscionable.
It's not
Absolutely
conscionable.
unconscionable.
In the greatest countries in the world,
Right.
people don't have anything to eat day to day. just because their regular income stream is not there right now.
Right.
That's unconscionable. Yet food is rotting in the fields. Milk is being thrown down the drain, because it can't get to the people that need it.
Right.
It's unconscionable.
Absolutely. Oh, that is definitely one of the charities that I give the most of my time and energy to as well. It's just to think that everybody on the planet could be fed, and it doesn't happen just amazes me.
It does amaze me, but just if we could just eliminate 20% of the wastage, everybody could be fed right away.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so which is our next pearl you'd like to go to?
So let's talk about, I got a question. So forgiveness. My big question for that was, do you forgive the doctor that gave you your original diagnosis?
I think that's what I had to do. Otherwise I wouldn't be sane. I wouldn't be doing things. Now, this is something you got to realize, Tom, is forgiveness is not for the person you gave it. Okay, it's for you. It's to free yourself up. It's to lift yourself out of those doldrums, because that is the secret to success. Desmond Tutu was a bishop in South Africa, and he was a bishop when apartheid was going on. And when apartheid ended, the blacks were ready to kill the whites because there was so much terrible things that were done. Well, he founded a reconciliation committee that actually helped people to heal, and they forgave those that perpetrated the acts. So there was no bloodshed in South Africa. There was no great acts of destruction afterwards. So, these are the things we have to learn, is that forgiveness is something you do. But, sometimes it's not something you do once, it's something you do over and over again, because the harmful act keeps coming up in your brain, and it keeps coming back like the waves on the ocean. And so you have to put it aside. And the way that I get people to try to do that is to name their hurt. Then they have to think of a positive emotion after that. Maybe that emotion of love, maybe some happiness situation that you're in, and then marry the two together in your mind, because that allows you to let those pieces go. That allows you to let it go. Because if you don't let it go, it's going to hurt you every day. It's going to be that baggage you're carrying along that doesn't help you in any way. So forgiveness is a very fundamental principle of growing and being longer. And I'm sure at one point in time you were hurt too, Tom, by somebody.
Oh, absolutely. I think
did you carry it with you, or did you let it go?
Oh, absolutely, let it go. But I think for so many times we think, much to your original point, that by holding that grudge, I am going to show that SOB, I'm never going to forgive them. It's like you're just holding on to that piece of hot coal in your hand and thinking and the person that you're cheesed off at is going to be burning from it, but that's not the case. So obviously another wisdom from my meditation, dude, just let it go. But that was a long time ago. And to be honest with you, I can't even think of one time where I was massively hurt, but just a little bit. I'm like, so-and-so's being a,
for sure.
But yeah, to your point, it's funny that people think that by holding a grudge that they're the one in power, wherein it's the exact opposite in my mind. So like you said, you have to put those things together. And you bring up a good point too. You have to make a new connection. So if you just hold on to that one thought of vengeance and of a grudge, it just keeps coming back. It'll just sit in your brain and it'll just stew. But until you make a new connection, linking it to something more positive, more loving, then it's always going to have power. But when you do that, make that link, it loses its power. So,
for sure. Okay.
Awesome. Well, you know what? We will save the next one for when your next book comes out, because I want to make sure that people have a way of understanding how they can get in touch with you and Harriet, and how they can pick up your book and all the great things that you're doing.
Sure, well, let's go through that. First of all, I think you should have Harriet on the show too, because she gives a different perspective. And
I absolutely, definitely am going to.
When we were at one meeting, we were introduced as Ebony and Ivory because Harriet is a beautiful black lady. She was a
Right.
model in New York, and I'm as white as snow. So it was a great little thing to come up with that. And we offer like the yin and the yang, different perspectives on the same points. And
Right.
it really is a journey, as I say. So you have to meet her too.
Oh,
Now, to
absolutely.
get my book, you should go to a website called fantasticlifebook.com, because it's not quite out yet. And I really encourage people to do that for two reasons. First is I'll give them free shipping when they do that. I'll
Sweet.
send the book to them for free. And secondly, we're giving 20% of the proceeds of this to women's shelters to help people
Nice.
that are in domestic abuse situations. So that would help me to further the cause. Now, 20% of a profit of a book is a huge amount, by the
Oh,
way,
absolutely.
because there isn't much profit in a book. But
Right.
we're willing to do that to make the world a better place. And this way
Nice.
you can do something to help others too.
Cool. I
Now,
appreciate
another
it.
thing I'd like to do with everybody is I'd like to give a gift to everybody that's on this podcast today. And everybody texts these days. I think everybody from the age of 2 is texting. So if you could text the word golden pearls, pearls with an S on it, to the following number, 1-819-717-2515. That's 1-819-717-2515. I will send you a golden pearl a week to help you on your journey. I
Yeah.
would love
Nice.
to help you on your journey. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can go to my website, drallenlycka.com. That's DRALLEN, Lycka.com, and come and join me. Come and learn from me. I would love to communicate with you and find out a little bit about you and how we can take you on your journey too.
Fantastic. Look at that. 3 great pearls added on to the pearls you already put in the book.
You know, life is a necklace of pearls of empowerment. And I like
Exactly.
to empower everybody.
I like that. I like that. I am the exact same thing. We're 2 men doing the same thing in different ways, and I love that. So
I love that too. Kindred spirits. As soon as I started talking to you, I knew this was going to be a great chat.
yeah, me too. And as always, I wasn't disappointed. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure and my honor to be on your show. Thank you.
Yeah, and I look forward to being on yours. You just say when. I'll
Okay,
drop
I'll
it.
get my girls to get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Thank you.
Alan, thank you so much for your time. I'll be talking to you real soon.
Have a phenomenal day.
You too. Take care now. Peace.
Bye now.